Good morning. It's Saturday, October 16th, and this has been a crazy week for news. At the men's club the other day, we were discussing a news item that was rather unusual. It spoke about the child of Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Gentleman was taking up his father's role as Superman. Now, we all remember Superman comics, and I read them regularly, and I never knew that Clark Kent was banging Lois Lane. That never came into my mind. And I don't know how he had time to do that, because he was a crime fighter, and he was always busy tracking down the news story and trying to make the world, a safe place to live. So it shocked me to find out that John Kent was their child. Now, perhaps he was able to do that while he was switching clothes in some phone booth somewhere. But it seems to me that there was no reason for the publishers of the Superman comics to make a big deal out of young John Kent's LGBTQ life, so to speak. Because whose business is it? Why? Why would they out this guy? Are they doing it because they want to sell more comic books? Probably. Probably they think if they make him a gay gentleman or a transgender gentleman or lady, that they'll sell more books. I don't know if they'll sell more books. I don't know if the LGBTQ community cares about the comics. I think they would accept it if he stayed in the closet. So it's a mystery to me why they're doing that. And listen, I think that Lois Lane and Clark Kent were entitled to a private life, and they shouldn't have exposed them in this manner. Of course, Lois and Clark are not around to complain about this thing, but it strikes me as unusual why the comic publishers had to go to this extent. After all, we view these guys, and children view these guys, in a different light than normal beings. And then what happened is, somebody mentioned Batman and Robin. Now imagine that. Think about that. Think about Batman as a pedophile, and Robin is his servant, his sex servant, his crime-fighting buddy. How would that look? You think that'll happen? Think the creators of Batman are going to take a step in the direction that the creators of Superman did? I don't know. I doubt that seriously, because pedophilia is entirely different than banging one's girlfriend and then having a child who is transgender. But I don't think we have to worry about Batman, because he had Catwoman as one of his associates. So he was probably doing her. So there's a lot to think about that goes on in the minds of these businessmen who are trying to sell comic books and things like that. So that's one of the crazy news items that happened this week. Another news item, and this is a much more sad episode, and this did not happen in the United States. This happened in Norway, in a small town outside the capital of Norway. Some gentleman went crazy, went off the wall. This gentleman has been in trouble with the law many times in Norway, and he's sort of been on watch, but nobody expected him to do what he did. And it turns out that this gentleman is a citizen of Norway, and I don't know how long he's been living there in this community, but people in the community knew him. One gentleman who described him as a troubled human being, because he always walked around quietly around the streets, listening with his headphones on, and was not really communicative to many people. The gentleman who was telling this story said he did talk to him. And what did this guy do? This guy took a bow and arrow into a supermarket and killed 5 people between the ages of 50 and 70 and injured 3 other people. And then he was caught. What possessed him to go into a supermarket with a bow and arrow? And he must have been pretty good, because I find it hard to believe that he could kill 5 people with a bow and arrow, and people can't escape that. But I don't know the particulars of the episode. But meanwhile, there is no violence in Norway. In fact, the Scandinavian countries are looked up at most of the world because they don't seem to have the same problems that the rest of the world does. Or if they do, they manage to keep it under control and out of the sight of the news medias. So in any event, the Norwegian government and the police in Norway have declared that this episode is clearly a hate crime and a terrorist act. And this gentleman fits the mold because he's a Muslim by conversion. And so even though there are no guns and they don't have mass shootings like we do, they are not used to any violent actions. In fact, the last time they had anything that was remotely like this, and it was much worse, was years ago. They had an attack, and it was actually a bomb, and it blew up and it killed 70 people. But aside from that, they don't have any mass killings in Norway or in any of the Scandinavian countries. And they don't have them because they don't allow guns. They don't have gun violence in that part of the world. So I think the world has got to look at this thing, got to look at what's happening. And we have to try and do more to protect our citizens and to keep the world a safe place. So I don't have much more to say today, except I found those two articles interesting in different ways, because they certainly are unexpected events. They were unexpected events. Nobody expected John Kent to come out of the closet, so to speak. And nobody could ever imagine somebody with a bow and arrow, able to kill 5 people and wound 3 others. I mean, you've got to be pretty much expert to do that kind of thing, and you probably were practicing. But it's a terrible thought that we have people in this society being human beings, that are capable of doing these evil deeds. I know if you go back and look at all the comic books, you will never find them chasing a mass murderer, because those things were just not in those comic books. So maybe somebody ought to change, not the sexual proclivity of comic book characters, but the way the comic book characters look at the world now versus the way they looked at the world in the 40s and 50s, when they were heroes, Men of Steel, and so on. So I leave you with that this morning, and I hope I gave you something to think about. So, bye.